What if I told you that achieving greatness in any area of life is rarely a matter of sheer talent? Instead, it's about a deeply rooted force that Angela Duckworth calls grit, a combination of passion and perseverance that empowers us to continue working toward our goals, even in the face of obstacles, setbacks, and disappointments. This is the essence of Duckworth's groundbreaking work, Grit. Today, let's dive into the transformative principles of this book, exploring why grit matters more than talent, and how adopting this mindset can have a profound effect on our daily lives and our pursuit of meaningful goals. The concept of grit starts with a core belief: talent is not the deciding factor in success. Angela Duckworth's research debunks the idea that only the naturally gifted rise to the top. She reveals a powerful insight: that effort counts twice. First, it multiplies whatever natural ability we have, and second, it strengthens our skills until they become a true asset. She phrases it elegantly: talent times effort equals skill, and skill times effort equals achievement. It's this cumulative effort over time that truly defines achievement. Duckworth's formula challenges the notion that talent is a prerequisite for success, urging us to think of hard work as the key that transforms potential into excellence. Now, why is this so impactful in modern life? We live in a world that often idolizes overnight success, but this very focus undermines the power of sustained, persistent work. Duckworth argues that a goal worth pursuing requires a sustained commitment, and grit becomes a compass for achieving those long-term ambitions. For anyone watching who feels overwhelmed by a goal that seems just out of reach, grit teaches us that the journey is not about monumental leaps, but steady, dedicated steps. Imagine this: rather than waiting for motivation to strike, you create a routine around that goal. You write, code, practice, or build every single day, regardless of whether you feel inspired. Over time, you'll find that your progress compounds, and this accumulation of effort leads to mastery. Duckworth shares the inspiring story of Alex Scott, a young girl who was diagnosed with cancer at an early age. Faced with her own suffering, Alex began a simple lemonade stand to raise money for cancer research. Despite her health challenges, she persisted. Her dedication attracted national attention, and eventually, thousands of other lemonade stands were established in her honor, raising over $1 million. Alex's story, tragic yet beautiful, shows how grit isn't confined to adults with years of experience. Even a child with limited resources, facing immense personal adversity, can embody grit when the cause is dear to their heart. Alex's unyielding commitment teaches us that we don't have to be the strongest or the most talented. We just have to care deeply enough to never give up. But why do these insights matter so much? Duckworth's work pushes us to rethink how we define success and what's possible for each of us. Her research calls on us to examine the myths we've built around achievement, myths that suggest only those born with extraordinary ability will reach extraordinary heights. This myth lets us off the hook, leading us to think that if we're not naturally gifted in something, it's simply not meant for us. But grit challenges us to unlearn these ideas, to consider that greatness might not be about what we were born with, but what we're willing to work toward. Duckworth's findings remind us that achievement is something we cultivate, not something we're handed. One powerful method Duckworth offers to cultivate grit is the hard thing rule. This rule is simple but transformative. Every person in her family chooses one challenging activity that requires deliberate practice, something they stick with, even when it becomes difficult or discouraging. The goal isn't to reach perfection, but to develop the resilience to keep going. Duckworth's family model is deeply relevant in our world of instant gratification. Choosing a single challenging task, committing to it, and following through without immediate reward is a powerful practice, especially for those of us in modern life where the pull of quick results can be almost irresistible. Consider this: if you pick one skill, like learning a language or training for a marathon, and commit to it for a full year, not just when it's enjoyable, but especially when it's tough, you're laying the groundwork for true personal transformation. Another cornerstone of grit is having a clear, long-term vision. Duckworth points out that it's not enough to merely have a goal. The most resilient among us have a deep, personal connection to that goal. She calls it a hierarchy of goals, where small daily actions align with larger aspirations, leading up to a core, lifelong purpose. For instance, if your ultimate vision is to build a business that contributes positively to society, you break it down into smaller, manageable actions: studying the market, creating a financial plan, or networking with like-minded people. Each of these steps, though they may seem small or even mundane, is essential to the larger picture. Duckworth's hierarchy reminds us that every seemingly insignificant action we take is part of a larger journey. Duckworth's insights encourage us to take stock of our beliefs about failure. In a culture that often equates failure with incompetence, Duckworth's perspective is revolutionary. Failure is not the opposite of success, but a critical part of it. Duckworth doesn't shy away from this reality. In fact, she argues that grit isn't about never failing. It's about having the resilience to view setbacks as valuable feedback. Take Thomas Edison, for example, who famously viewed his thousands of failed attempts at inventing the light bulb as learning experiences. He reframed his setbacks, saying, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Duckworth's teachings echo this mindset. When we adopt a learning-oriented perspective, failure becomes a stepping stone to growth, rather than a reason to quit. If we adopt these principles, what's next? What changes in our lives? By embracing grit, we can see our goals and setbacks through a different lens. We start to understand that progress isn't about massive leaps, but the quiet, sometimes monotonous daily steps that carry us toward our purpose. This means making grit a practical part of our lives by setting small, sustainable habits. Imagine you're striving to improve your physical fitness. Instead of attempting a drastic regimen, you start by walking just 10 minutes a day. Over time, you increase that to 15, then 20, building a foundation that becomes resilient to life's interruptions. These seemingly modest habits, when maintained, build momentum and eventually transform into significant achievements. Duckworth's point is simple yet profound. If you focus on daily, manageable actions that align with your goal, you are far more likely to sustain them over time, and ultimately, you'll develop the grit needed to achieve lasting success. Reflecting on grit, I found myself rethinking the way I approach challenges in my own life. It's easy to be passionate about something in the early days when excitement fuels our efforts. But what about when the novelty fades? Duckworth's work has inspired me to dig deeper, to find that enduring purpose within myself that doesn't waver with changing circumstances. Grit is not about bursts of energy or short-lived inspiration. It's about a quiet, steady commitment that shapes us in profound, often invisible ways. If you're on a journey that feels arduous, if you're unsure if your efforts will ever pay off, I hope you find encouragement here. Progress is not always visible, but with grit, it is inevitable. This message of grit is transformative. By embracing the principles Duckworth outlines, we can reshape our perspective on who we are and what we're capable of. Grit gives us the freedom to pursue what matters most to us, knowing that our success isn't predetermined by some measure of talent or luck. Instead, it's the daily, intentional work we're willing to put in. So, as we wrap up, I challenge you to look at your own life and ask, what is the hard thing you're willing to commit to? What can you pursue with that same grit? Showing up daily, regardless of challenges, that will bring you closer to the life you envision. Duckworth's grit shows us that success is less about talent and more about a deep, undying dedication to a cause. It's about becoming the person who chooses to persist, who finds value in the journey, and who believes that greatness is built, one day at a time. If this message resonates with you, join us here on Books Over Mind as we continue exploring insights like these. Together, let's make grit more than a concept. It's a path we can walk together toward a life of purpose and resilience. And remember, keep books over mind.